The morning light streamed through the lace curtains, illuminating Emily's cheek. On the morning of her wedding day, she gazed at herself in the mirror, reflecting on her life up to this point. 2 years ago, she never could have imagined this day would come. "Emily, hurry up and get ready. The hairstylist is waiting." Her mother Barbara's voice echoed from downstairs. She seemed to be in her usual state of panic. Barbara Wilson was a woman famous in the neighborhood for her pretentiousness. Since her husband Robert held a managerial position at a mid-sized insurance company, they lived an upper-middle-class lifestyle, but her eyes were always fixed on the upper class. Her position in the social club, her daughter's marriage prospects, the brands of clothes she wore, everything was a status symbol to show off to others. When Emily slowly descended the stairs, her sister Jessica was already elegantly sipping coffee in the living room. Jessica was the daughter who had perfectly met their mother's expectations. After graduating from a prestigious university, she worked at a famous investment bank and married David Hamilton, the CEO of an IT company, 3 years ago. David's company, Hamilton Technologies, was experiencing rapid growth and was frequently featured in local business magazines. "Are you okay?" Jessica turned around, but there was a hint of superiority in her eyes. "Did Michael leave early for work this morning?" "Yes, he had delivery work to do," Emily answered quietly. Barbara frowned. Delivery work. On his wedding day, prioritizing such work over this. Emily said nothing. Her meeting with Michael O'Connor had been a year and a half ago. When Emily was working at the library, she met him as a delivery truck driver for the shipping company that handled book deliveries. Michael was a gentle and honest person. What started as a professional relationship gradually developed as she was drawn to his kindness and sincerity. However, when Emily reported her relationship with Michael to her family, their reaction was colder than she had expected. "A truck driver?" Barbara was speechless. "Emily, couldn't you have chosen someone with a more respectable profession?" Her father Robert also frowned. "Marriage is an important life decision. Shouldn't you consider the other person's financial capacity?" The most cutting was Jessica. "Think about our social standing. How am I supposed to explain this to David's company colleagues?" Emily continued the relationship despite her family's opposition. Michael never got angry about the cold treatment from her family, instead smiling peacefully and saying, "Someday they'll understand." "Emily, are you really sure about this?" Barbara asked again, as if seeking confirmation. "It's not too late. Like Jessica, you could find a more distinguished man." "Mother, I love Michael. That's enough for me. Love alone can't sustain a life. Face reality." Jessica chimed in. "That's right. Look at David. His company's sales increased 200% over last year. That's the kind of man a woman should marry to be happy." Emily sighed deeply. Throughout her life, she had constantly been compared to her sister. Academic performance, career choices, and now even her marriage partner. Her mother's love was always conditional, and to Barbara, who cared about appearances, her daughters seemed like tools to prove her own worth. The hairstylist arrived and began carefully styling Emily's hair. Looking at herself in the mirror, she faced the complex emotions of welcoming this day. On what should be the greatest day of joy in her life, marrying the man she loved, why did her heart feel so heavy? "It's such a special day, why do you look so gloomy?" Jessica asked through the mirror. "I'm not gloomy," Emily tried to smile, but her smile seemed somehow lonely. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the bells of St. Matthew's Church rang out majestically. Emily was making her final preparations in the dressing room, trying to calm her racing heart. Dressed in her pure white wedding gown, she looked more beautiful and radiant than ever before in her life. "Are you ready?" Her father Robert knocked and entered. Dressed in a black tuxedo, he seemed more nervous than usual. "Emily, you look truly beautiful." "Thank you, Dad." Emily put her arm through her father's. Robert often followed his wife's strong opinions, but his love for his daughter was genuine. "To be honest, I was worried about Michael too," Robert said quietly. "But seeing how happy you look, maybe that's what matters most." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "Dad. Come on, let's go. Michael is waiting for you." When the church's great doors opened, the beautiful melody of the organ began to play. Relatives and friends sat on both sides of the aisle. Emily linked arms with her father and began walking slowly. The moment Michael, standing at the altar, turned around, his face lit up. Michael looked distinguished in his black tuxedo, completely different from his usual work clothes. His deep blue eyes overflowed with love for Emily. As Emily approached the altar, she felt the atmosphere in the church becoming warmer. Pastor Johnson smiled as he looked at the couple. "Beloved friends, thank you for gathering today for the wedding of Michael O'Connor and Emily Wilson. The time came for the vows." Michael spoke first. "Emily, meeting you was the greatest miracle of my life. I'm grateful every day for your kindness, strength, and beautiful heart. No matter what difficulties we face, I swear before God to protect and love you always." His voice trembled, but his words carried deep truth. Many people in the congregation were moved to tears. It was Emily's turn. "Michael, you taught me what true love really means. Supported by your honesty, kindness, and unwavering heart, I was able to become a new version of myself. I look forward to seeing how beautiful our life together will be." The rings were exchanged, and they were united as husband and wife. The moment Michael kissed Emily, the church erupted in applause. However, the expressions of Barbara and Jessica in the front row were complicated. After the ceremony, it was time for family introductions. Michael's mother Margaret stood up. She was dressed in an elegant gray dress and carried herself with natural dignity. Margaret approached Emily's family with a smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, congratulations on this wonderful occasion. I'm very happy that my son could marry such a wonderful woman." Margaret's way of speaking conveyed refined education. Barbara showed a momentarily confused expression. For the mother of a truck driver, she seemed far too sophisticated. Likewise, Barbara answered with a superficial smile. "Michael is, well, a fine young man." "Thank you. Since he was young, my son has been responsible and approached everything seriously. His current work has his own reasons behind it." Margaret's words seemed to carry some deeper meaning. Jessica interrupted. "Has Michael always been a truck driver?" "Regarding my son's work, I think he'll explain it himself," Margaret smiled peacefully. "What's important isn't the work itself, but what kind of attitude one brings to it, don't you think?" Barbara and Jessica seemed a bit perplexed by Margaret's response. Her grace and intelligence were far removed from their image of a truck driver's mother. It was time to move to the reception venue. The elegant hotel banquet room was beautifully decorated with white roses and candles. As guests took their seats, Emily and Michael sat at the head table. "Today was truly a beautiful ceremony," Michael whispered, holding Emily's hand. "Yes, but I'm a little nervous." "Especially about the speech time," Emily replied quietly. Michael sensed her anxiety. "It's okay, I'm right here with you." At the venue, guests were chatting, but a subtle tension filled the air at Emily's family's table. Barbara and Jessica were quietly discussing their impressions of Margaret. "Is that woman really the mother of a truck driver?" Jessica frowned. "Her way of speaking and behavior are like someone from high society." "Yes, it's a bit strange," Barbara also tilted her head. "But she's still working class." She's probably just putting on airs. David had been listening to his wife's conversation but seemed to be thinking about something. The name Michael O'Connor seemed vaguely familiar, but he couldn't quite remember why. The MC stood up with the microphone. Now, we'd like to hear some congratulatory remarks. First, we'll hear from the bride's mother, Mrs. Barbara Wilson. When Barbara stood up, a subtle tension ran through the venue. She gripped the microphone and looked around the room. Over 100 guests' eyes were focused on her. Emily's heart was pounding violently. From her mother's expression, she couldn't expect anything good. Everyone, Barbara raised her voice. My daughter Emily is getting married today. To be honest, our family is a bit surprised. Murmurs began in the venue. Emily's face went pale. Michael gently squeezed her hand. Emily's marriage partner is Mr. Michael O'Connor. He is, Barbara paused for a moment, a truck driver. At this point, the atmosphere in the venue clearly changed. Some guests began talking quietly among themselves. Barbara continued. Our family has maintained a certain social position. My husband holds a managerial position at an insurance company, and I'm active in the local social club. And our younger daughter Jessica is married to the CEO of an IT company. Jessica smiled proudly. David seemed somewhat uncomfortable but kept his expression neutral for his wife's sake. So, when Emily, Barbara's voice grew louder, decided to marry a poor truck driver, it was an unexpected event for us. The venue fell silent. Emily felt like crying from shame and anger. But everyone, Barbara put on a fake smile, please don't laugh. Then she began laughing herself. We were confused at first too, but love will work things out somehow. Even if he's poor, even if he's a truck driver, he's the man our daughter chose. Awkward laughter began to leak from parts of the venue. Barbara's intention was clear. While ostensibly offering words of blessing, she was actually disparaging the groom. Mr. Michael certainly doesn't have much education and isn't in a prestigious profession, but Barbara was getting carried away. I'm sure he'll work very hard. He's a truck driver, after all. The laughter in the venue grew louder. Michael sat quietly, but his face had become hard as stone. Emily felt the urge to stand up but couldn't move. Emily had other, better options, but, Barbara continued, love can't be explained by logic. Even if he's poor, even if he lacks education, she says she's happy. At this point, Jessica stood up. Let me add to my mother's words, Jessica took the microphone. I'm also surprised by the choice my sister Emily has made. Jessica's voice was clearly filled with superiority. My husband David is the CEO of Hamilton Technologies. This year's sales are expected to exceed $50 million, with over 200 employees. Jessica puffed out her chest. The state governor even attended our wedding. The venue guests listened intently to Jessica's boasting. Meanwhile, a heavy atmosphere hung over Emily and Michael's table. In comparison, Jessica looked at her sister. Michael works in delivery, doesn't he? His annual income is probably, she smiled maliciously, on a completely different scale from ours. Laughter rose from the venue again. Jessica continued with satisfaction. But that's fine. Everyone has their place in life. For my sister Emily, this is probably appropriate. David lightly tugged at his wife's arm, but Jessica wouldn't stop. Unlike my CEO husband, Jessica's voice echoed through the venue, truck drivers do important work too. Delivering packages is also essential work. The venue was in complete uproar. Some guests laughed with amusement, while others showed confused expressions. Emily's friends looked at the Wilson family women with anger and sympathy. My sister was never realistic, Jessica wouldn't stop. Idealistic, or should I say naive? But this marriage will surely teach her about reality. Just as Michael was about to stand up, a voice came from the back of the venue. "Excuse me." All eyes turned in unison. Margaret O'Connor was quietly standing. She had been sitting quietly until now, but her dignified presence changed the atmosphere of the entire venue. "I'm sorry, but may I say a word?" Margaret's voice was quiet but carried a strange dignity. The MC hesitantly handed her the microphone. "Thank you." Margaret took the microphone and looked around the venue. "Everyone, I am Margaret, Michael O'Connor's mother." The venue fell completely silent. The previous commotion was gone, replaced by deep silence. "I've been listening to various comments about my son." Margaret's voice was calm but had steel-like strength. "There seem to be some misunderstandings, so I'd like to correct them." Barbara and Jessica's faces changed color. Emily held her breath as she watched her mother-in-law. "It's true that my son works as a truck driver," Margaret continued. "However, he has his own reasons for doing so." The tension in the venue heightened. David showed an expression as if he had realized something. "Before I speak to everyone," Margaret smiled, "I have one question. Is Mr. David Hamilton present?" David stood up in surprise. "Yes. I'm David Hamilton." "It's a pleasure to meet you." Margaret bowed gracefully. "Actually, your company and ours have been doing business together for many years." The venue began to murmur. Jessica looked at David with a confused expression. "What do you mean?" David started to say when his face turned pale. He had remembered something. Could it be? David's voice trembled. "O'Connor Logistics." Margaret nodded quietly. "Yes. My son Michael is the president of O'Connor Logistics." The venue erupted in explosive commotion. Barbara and Jessica lost their words and froze like stones. "Wait a moment." David stood up frantically. "O'Connor Logistics is one of our company's largest clients. Our annual contract exceeds $20 million. Margaret smiled peacefully. "Since taking over the company, my son has been learning the fieldwork from scratch. Even though he's the president, he sometimes drives trucks himself to understand his employees' feelings." The venue fell completely silent. Margaret continued to hold the microphone calmly. David's face was ashen, Jessica couldn't understand what was happening, and Barbara sat with her mouth open as if in a nightmare. "Everyone, let me explain in more detail." Margaret's voice remained calm but completely dominated the venue. "My son Michael is the third-generation president of O'Connor Logistics. The company was founded by his grandfather in 1945 and is now one of the largest logistics companies in the eastern region." The venue guests murmured. Many knew the name O'Connor Logistics. It was a very famous company locally. Annual revenue is approximately $300 million, with over 1,500 employees. Margaret stated the facts matter-of-factly. "When my son became president 2 years ago, he decided to learn the fieldwork from scratch. 3 days a week, he drives trucks himself and engages in delivery work." Emily pressed her trembling hand to her mouth. Michael looked at her with an apologetic smile. "Why would he do such a thing?" an elderly male guest called out. "My son always said, an executive who doesn't know the field can never capture the hearts of employees." Margaret's eyes shone with pride. "On weekends, he wears the company uniform and carries packages in the warehouse. All the employees truly respect him." David staggered to his feet. "Excuse me, I need to confirm, is Mr. Michael O'Connor really the president of O'Connor Logistics?" Michael slowly stood up. Unlike his previous quiet demeanor, his posture now carried natural dignity. "Yes, Mr. David Hamilton. It's a pleasure to meet you." Michael's voice was calm but clearly had a different resonance than before. "We've been doing business with your company for many years, and we're grateful." David's legs shook. "But why did you work as a truck driver?" Because I believe knowing the field is true leadership, Michael answered peacefully. Handling deliveries to the library was also part of community service. Meeting Emily there was the greatest fortune of my life. Jessica spoke with a trembling voice. But you said you were a truck driver. I am indeed a driver too, Michael smiled. But that's not all I am. I intended to be honest with Emily from the beginning, but seeing her family's reaction, I decided to take some time. Margaret took the microphone again. Actually, my son had one wish. He wanted to know whether his marriage partner's family would see his character rather than his title or wealth. Emily looked up at Michael. Michael, so you. I intended to tell you the truth from the beginning, Michael took her hand. But seeing your family's reaction, I thought I'd continue this way. I wanted to know how much you loved me and what kind of people your family really were. Barbara finally squeezed out her voice. So you were testing us from the beginning? Rather than testing, Margaret answered instead, we wanted to see if you would look at my son's character. Unfortunately, we discovered that you judge people solely by their occupation. The venue fell silent again. Margaret's words were gentle yet scathing. David frantically spoke up. President Michael, my wife. Mr. David, Michael stopped him. Today's events will have absolutely no effect on our business relationship. Business is separate from personal feelings. However, David's complexion didn't improve at all. He understood the gravity of his wife publicly insulting the president of his company's most important client today. However, Michael continued, private socializing will be difficult in the future. Jessica turned pale. Wait, brother-in-law, Ms. Jessica, Michael's voice turned cold. You called me a poor truck driver and said Emily was naive. These words cannot be taken back. Margaret stood up gracefully. Everyone, I apologize for having to discuss this at my son's wedding. However, it was necessary to tell the truth. The venue guests were completely overwhelmed by this development. Those who had been laughing earlier were now wrapped in silence. Ms. Emily, Margaret turned to the bride. You loved my son's character without knowing his position or wealth. Nothing could make us happier. Tears overflowed from Emily's eyes. Mrs. Margaret. You showed us what true love means. We all understand how fortunate my son is. At this moment, Barbara stood up with a trembling voice. Mr. Michael, Mrs. Barbara, Michael turned around. At your daughter's wedding, you publicly insulted me as poor, uneducated, and not in a respectable profession. Barbara's face turned bright red. I didn't mean isn't sufficient, Margaret said quietly. Words carry responsibility. The other guests in the venue also looked at the Wilson family women with condemning eyes. The earlier laughter had now become evidence of their humiliation. The MC frantically took the microphone. Well then, let's move on to dinner time. However, the atmosphere in the venue had completely changed. Many guests approached Michael and Emily with congratulations, but no one would approach the Wilson family table. Jessica tugged at David's sleeve. Hey, how serious is this? David was holding his head. It's the worst. O'Connor Logistics accounts for 30% of our company's sales. If they cancel our contract. Surely that won't happen? Jessica's voice trembled. President Michael said it wouldn't affect business, but David looked desperate. Word of today will spread to other clients. The industry is small. Barbara sat in her chair in a dazed state. She was finally beginning to understand the gravity of publicly insulting the mother of the region's most successful young executive. Emily watched this situation with complex feelings. Joy at the truth being revealed mixed with disappointment in her family. Several months passed, and Emily and Michael were living a happy newlywed life in their new home. Michael continued his delivery work once a week, and Emily truly respected her husband for this. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" Emily asked Michael one night. "Because I loved you, I wanted to know your family's true nature," Michael answered, holding his wife. "If they had known my position, they would have changed their attitude. But you were different. You loved me even when you thought I was just a truck driver." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. "But testing my family. Maybe it was too harsh. But as a result, it proved that you're truly a wonderful woman." Meanwhile, serious problems were occurring in the Wilson household. Barbara's behavior at the wedding became the talk of local society, and her position in the social club deteriorated. Many friends began keeping their distance, and she became isolated. "It's your fault," Barbara took out her frustration on Robert. "Why didn't you investigate earlier?" "Investigate? You jumped to conclusions on your own." Robert was exhausted. Jessica and David's situation was even more serious. The wedding incident spread rapidly throughout the industry, and David's company's reputation plummeted. While business with O'Connor Logistics continued, other important clients began canceling contracts one after another. "I never thought your jealousy of your sister would destroy the company," David told his wife. "I didn't know either," Jessica answered through tears. "I never imagined he was the president of such a large company." The company's performance rapidly deteriorated, forcing employee layoffs. The luxurious lifestyle Jessica had been proud of was now a thing of the past. One day, Barbara called Emily. "Emily, please, let me apologize to Michael. I don't want to be involved with you people anymore." Emily's voice was quiet but filled with determination. "But we're family. If we were family, why didn't you simply celebrate my happiness? If we were family, why did you insult my husband?" Barbara was speechless. "True family isn't about blood relations, but about people who can respect each other," Emily continued. "Mrs. Margaret welcomed me as family from day one. But you only tried to use me for your own appearances." The phone line went dead. Barbara collapsed in tears, still gripping the receiver. A year later, Emily and Michael were blessed with their first child. Margaret was overjoyed at her grandchild's birth and loved Emily like her own daughter. "The love you've given my son is a treasure beyond price," Margaret told Emily. Occasional letters of apology arrived from Emily's original family, but she put them away without reading them. A wounded heart doesn't heal easily. However, the warm times with her new family filled her heart. Barbara still spent most of her time alone, having lost her once social lifestyle. Jessica and David had moved to a small apartment, and David was working as an employed president at another company. Both continued to regret their foolishness from that day. Emily learned firsthand that true happiness lies not in titles or wealth, but in bonds with people who truly love each other. And the remaining family members also came to painfully understand the foolishness of judging people by their appearance or occupation.